The Middle East is, well, it's grappling with some really complex nuclear ambitions. It feels like a powder keg, really, where just one misstep could ignite something with truly global consequences. And, just days ago, that potential felt even sharper. Satellite images surfaced again showing accelerated construction at Israel's Dimona nuclear reactor that immediately kicked off a fresh debate among experts asking, what is its purpose? And almost at the same time, Hezbollah, the Iranian-backed group, was boasting its rockets could reach Dimona. You see, these aren't isolated things. This is all happening after a summer of really intense escalation. I mean,
Huh.
Israel assassinated Hamas head Ismail Haniyeh right in Tehran, killed Hezbollah chief Hassan Nasrallah, and then in this really stunning show of military power, destroyed almost all of Iran's air defenses. That was after Iran fired, 200 ballistic missiles at Israel back in October 2024?
Exactly, a huge number.
And if that wasn't enough, the U.S. even conducted strikes on Iranian nuclear sites in June 2025. They basically inserted themselves into what some sources are calling the 12-day war between Israel and Iran.
Direct involvement.
So the stakes, they're incredibly clear. You've got Iran pushing towards nuclear capability, Israel sticking to its nuclear ambiguity, and the whole region just holding its breath. Today, we're going to try and cut through all the noise surrounding this Iran-Israel nuclear standoff. We'll unpack the escalating actions, the secretive programs, and the really profound risks of miscalculation. We're drawing from recent news, intel reports, strategic analyses.
A lot of material to sift through.
Absolutely. Our mission here is to understand why this precarious balance matters so much to global stability and what the real dangers are if it finally tips over. So to really get a handle on where we are now, let's map out the recent history. The last few years have seen this kind of whirlwind of escalating actions pushing everyone closer to the brink.
It's fascinating, isn't it, that eye for an eye dynamic?
Yeah.
And how quickly things have accelerated, especially since, say, 2021. Take the April 2021 sabotage at Iran's Natanz nuclear facility. That was widely attributed to Israel, right?
Right.
And Iran's response was, well, it was highly provocative. They immediately started enriching uranium up to 60% purity.
60%, that's incredibly high.
It's their highest level ever, and technically it's just a short step from weapons-grade material, a clear breach of the 2015 nuclear deal. And it wasn't just a technical move. You had explicit calls in Iran, like an editorial in the ultra-conservative paper Kion, urging a retaliatory strike on Israel's Dimona facility, directly calling it eye for an eye.
Wow. So really setting a pattern there.
Exactly, a pattern of escalation that just intensified dramatically into 2024.
And it definitely kept intensifying. It seemed to shift from sort of covert ops to very open, very overt military actions. How did that sequence play out?
Absolutely. By 2024, Israel really ramped things up against Iranian targets and proxies. In April, you had the assassination of 2 Iranian generals. Israel bombed an Iranian consulate in Syria to do it.
It's a major escalation, hitting a diplomatic building.
Huge. Iran retaliated directly, launching drones at Israel, though they didn't really achieve much. Then Israel responded with a, quote, surgical strike on an Iranian radar system near Natanz, a clear signal of their capabilities.
Okay.
Then the summer got even more dramatic. Israel assassinated Hamas leader Ismail Haniyeh in Tehran, reportedly using a bomb planted beforehand.
Right, in Tehran itself.
In Tehran. Then September. Thousands of Hezbollah operatives wounded or killed when their pagers exploded all at once. A week later, Hezbollah chief Hassan Nasrallah himself was killed in an Israeli strike on his bunker in Beirut.
So just blow after blow against Iran and its allies. After all that, what was Iran thinking with its response in October 2024? What was the strategic goal there?
Well, Iran was clearly feeling the pressure, humiliated, sources say.
Yeah.
So they launched that barrage, 200 ballistic missiles aimed at Israel, a really significant direct military action.
But Israel's counter was swift and decisive.
Extremely decisive. 3 weeks later, Israel hit back with what sources called a massive airstrike. It reportedly destroyed, and this is stunning, nearly all of Iran's air defenses in a single evening.
Wow, nearly all of them.
That's what the reports suggest. A truly shocking display of military authority, as one source put it. And then, adding another whole dimension, June 2025, the U.S. military gets directly involved, striking 3 nuclear sites in Iran.
As part of this 12-day war.
Exactly. Part of that conflict with the U.S. essentially jumping in to help Israel's efforts to dismantle Iran's nuclear program.
Okay, we've covered a dizzying amount of action there. What really strikes me is how deliberate it all seems. This tit-for-tat escalation, where each move seems calculated to provoke a specific, often stronger response, it feels less like accidents and more like a dangerous negotiation of red lines in real time.
That's a great way to put it.
So what do these relentless actions tell us about each country's core strategy, and crucially, their nuclear ambitions?
Right, this brings us to a really key point. Both nations are dealing with complex pressures, internal and external, around their nuclear capabilities. Let's start with Iran. Sources often highlight Iran's, quote, furtive efforts to build an atomic weapon as the main concern. And this is, layered on top of historical rhetoric from past presidents like Rafsanjani and Ahmadinejad, strong language about wiping Israel off the map.
That rhetoric certainly raises the stakes.
Absolutely. And despite those U.S. Israeli strikes in June 2025, Iran hasn't backed down on uranium enrichment. Satellite images show them rebuilding the bombed Fordo facility. Plus, they've suspended cooperation with the IAEA, the UN's nuclear watchdog at times.
And what about the Iranian people? Has public opinion shifted after all these attacks?
It seems to have, quite dramatically, actually. Public opinion, which used to be kind of marginal on needing nuclear weapons, now increasingly seems to favor getting them as, quote, the ultimate deterrent against more attacks.
A direct response to the strikes, then?
Seems likely, yes. And Iran's clearly watched North Korea's playbook, the Pyongyang Gambit, using negotiations basically to buy time while advancing their program. So it raises the possibility, Iran might offer to accept international supervision but demand things like Israel returning to pre-1967, borders the lines from before the Six-Day War, or maybe pushing for a Middle East nuclear weapons-free zone.
A tactical move.
Potentially. Internally, you have President Pezeshkian, who's seen as a reformist, advocating for patience and rationality dialogue. But he faces serious opposition from hardliners. Plus, the ongoing Gaza conflict makes any U.S.-Iran diplomacy incredibly difficult right now.
Okay, so that's Iran. Then you have Israel operating under this completely different, almost shadowy nuclear doctrine. How does their approach stack up?
It's a stark contrast, isn't it?
Yeah.
Israel's whole approach is defined by this long-standing policy of nuclear ambiguity. It goes back to David Ben-Gurion in 1958.
Never confirm, never deny.
Exactly. The idea is to have deterrence without actually confirming you have the weapons, which could trigger a regional arms race or invite preemptive strikes. But despite the ambiguity, the general consensus is that Israel does have a pretty formidable nuclear arsenal. Estimates range from, say, 80 warheads up to maybe 300, including advanced thermonuclear devices.
And they have delivery systems.
Oh, yes. Those 6 Dolphin-class submarines from Germany are widely seen as providing a crucial second strike capability, the ability to retaliate even if attacked first. And central to all this, of course, is the Dimona facility, the Shimon Peres Negev Nuclear Research Center. Those recent satellite images showing accelerated construction are fueling debate. Is it a new heavy water reactor? Or maybe a weapons assembly facility?
So still ambiguous, even the construction.
Right. But what's not ambiguous is the near-unanimous view within Israel that Iran must never get a nuclear weapon. That's deeply rooted in their history and their perception of existential threats.
So with Iran pushing and Israel holding this ambiguous line, how does the U.S. fit into this extremely delicate, extremely dangerous equation?
The U.S. strategy is essentially containment. Preventing a nuclear Iran is seen as, quote, crucial to its global military strategy and economic primacy. This translates into a huge military presence in the Middle East, something like 40,000 U.S. forces, aerial refueling tankers, aircraft carriers like the USS Nimitz.
It's a significant commitment.
Huge.
Yeah.
And the U.S. provides critical defensive support to Israel, too. Things like the Patriot and THAAD missile defense systems, which contribute to that reported 90% intercept rate against incoming missiles.
90% is remarkable.
It really is. And the U.S. Space Force uses satellites for early warning, detecting Iranian launches within minutes. Technology plays a massive role here. Politically, you see strong backing from Republicans in Congress for President Trump's tough stance on Iran and support for Israel's right to self-defense, including potentially unilateral strikes.
But what about the American public? Is there an appetite for more involvement?
That's the counterpressure. U.S. domestic opinion generally shows a reluctance for deep military involvement in an Israel-Iran fight. This gives Trump a political incentive, perhaps, to lean towards pragmatism, de-escalation, maybe even exploring indirect talks, potentially using Moscow as a go-between.
So this intricate dance of ambition, ambiguity, containment, it creates this incredibly dangerous situation. But let's talk about the nightmare scenario. What happens if Iran does cross the threshold, if they get a nuclear weapon? What are the ripple effects then?
That's where things get truly alarming. You have to consider the profound instability, the potential for what some call a nuclear great game that pulls in many more players than just Israel and Iran. And crucially, the Cold War deterrence models based on two superpowers might just not work here.
Why not? What's different?
Well, first, geography and time. The distance between Israel and Iran is only about 800 miles. That means missile flight times are just 7 to 8 minutes.
7 to 8 minutes. That's terrifyingly short.
It's dramatically shorter than the 30-35 minutes between the U.S. and Soviet Union during the Cold War. This compressed time frame puts, as one source says, enormous strain on warning systems, on command and control. Decisions have to be made almost instantly.
And Israel's geography plays into this too, doesn't it? I've heard it described as a one-bomb country.
Exactly. It's described as a densely packed country of 9.8 million people with no strategic depth. Literally a one-bomb country. A couple of nuclear hits on Tel Aviv and Haifa, catastrophic consequences. There's almost no margin for error.
Which makes the risk of miscalculation even higher.
Precisely. We assume rational actors in deterrence theory, but history shows leaders can take, well, absurd risks. Think of Castro urging Khrushchev to launch nukes during the Cuban Missile Crisis, or Mao Zedong saying China could lose 300 million people in a nuclear war. There's a real lack of insight, as analysts say, into how Iranian and Israeli leaders specifically calculate cost, benefit, risk, especially under that kind of extreme time pressure. The door for miscalculation is wide open.
So if Iran gets the bomb, it's not just an Israel-Iran problem anymore. It potentially becomes a regional free-for-all, a proliferation cascade.
That's the major concern, yes. If Iran goes nuclear, it would likely, quote, trigger a proliferation cascade. Other regional powers, think Saudi Arabia, Turkey, Egypt, maybe even Iraq, could feel compelled to pursue their own nuclear weapons. And experts estimate this could happen relatively quickly, maybe within 3 to 8 years.
Creating a multipolar nuclear region.
Yes, an N-player competition. And traditional deterrence ideas like mediate mutual assured destruction, which kind of worked uneasily in a two-player game, they'd likely be totally ineffective and incredibly unstable in that kind of multipolar environment.
And outside powers might get involved?
That's the nuclear great game idea. External players like North Korea, Pakistan, Russia, maybe China, countries with strong interests in regional oil and gas, could potentially help regional states get key technologies, making everything even less stable.
And beyond just more states getting bombs, there are other threats too, like these catalytic wars and cyber attacks.
Right. The risk of catalytic wars goes up where a third party, maybe another state or even a non-state group, could try to deliberately spark a conflict between two nuclear-armed states, tricking them into fighting.
How could they do that?
Well, cyber weapons are one way. They have, as sources note, relatively low barriers to entry. Someone could potentially hack into early warning systems and feed in false information, make it look like a missile attack is happening when it's not.
Triggering a real nuclear response based on a fake attack.
It's a terrifying possibility.
Okay.
And remember those threats against Dimona specifically. That 2021 editorial calling for an attack, plus Hezbollah leader Nasrallah boasting just recently in September 2025 that his rockets can reach it, even releasing video coordinates.
It highlights the vulnerability.
Exactly. The overall consequences of a nuclearized Middle East would just be devastating. Widespread destruction, obviously, but also severe disruption to global energy supplies, the collapse of the international non-proliferation regime. It would undermine the U.S. advantage in conventional warfare, too. It's hard to overstate the potential fallout.
It really does sound like an almost unmanageable nightmare scenario. Looking at all these interlocking risks, what stands out to you as the single biggest, most immediate challenge in trying to prevent this from happening? We've really journeyed through an incredibly complex and, frankly, dangerous landscape today, from the tit-for-tat strikes and covert ops to these silent, creeping threats of proliferation. The question isn't just if one of these nations will cross the nuclear threshold, but maybe more urgently, how the world prevents a catastrophic misstep along the way.
Yeah, this whole situation just underscores the urgent need for clarity, for verifiable action. Diplomatic exit ramps might appear now and then, but given the history, given the unique dynamics of the region, you need extreme caution, unwavering vigilance. The consequences of failure here are truly global. They impact energy, stability, and that fundamental taboo against using nuclear weapons that's somehow held since August 1945.
So, here's something to really think about. Considering those incredibly short missile flight times between Israel and Iran, just 7 or 8 minutes, and knowing about all the close calls and miscalculations even during the much longer time frames of the Cold War, How much faith can we realistically place in traditional deterrence models to actually prevent a nuclear conflict when these immense, world-altering decisions have to be made in such a terrifyingly brief window?